everyone, it's Stacey. I can't believe we're on to block 6 of our Mystery Block of the Month series, and this month we're going to be doing the very beautiful and lovely Ohio Star block. So let's get started. To make our Ohio Star block, you're going to need 4 different fabrics, and I've already pre-cut mine because we're just cutting squares and it was getting a little bit repetitive. But if you'd like a recap on how to cut fabric with a rotary cutter, I'll put a link in the description below for a video showing you exactly how to do that. But now let's get on to what pieces you're going to need. So last time we made half square triangles, but this time we're making quarter square triangles. So we've got 4 quarters making up our square. And for each of these squares, you need to cut A, 2 pieces 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches. For B, 1 piece at 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches, and then for C, which is the C is also the same fabric as the D, you'll need 1 piece at 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches. Then for the D, the outer squares, you'll need 4 pieces at 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches, and for the center piece, that's E, 1 piece at 4.5 inches by 4.5 inches. And you'll find this little table and legend over on my website, and again I'll put the link in the description below, so don't worry if you find that a bit confusing and you'd like to have a closer look at that. I'll make sure that's available to you. Now let's get started with our Ohio Star block. So the first thing we're going to do is take our 2 A pieces that we cut at 5.5 inches by 5.5 inches, and I'll take one and face it with the wrong side facing me, and we just need to draw a line from the corner to the corner. So I'm just going to take my ruler, I'm going to pop my pencil at the top, at the very corner there, and then line it up at the bottom. I find that's the best way to make sure we're getting a really nice straight line. And then I like to start in the middle and come down, and then in the middle and go up. And I just find that helps. Otherwise, if you try and start at the top, you do tend to drag that corner down. And once I've done that, I'll just take my second piece and do exactly the same. Okay, once I've done that, I'm going to then take my B piece and place it right sides facing me, and then the piece that I just drew the line on, right sides facing down. So now the right sides are facing together, and then I'm just going to pop a pin in on either side, making sure all those edges are lined up nicely. And I'll do that to both pieces. So this is my piece C. And I've got the right sides of the fabric facing each other here. And again, making sure all the edges are lined up nicely, popping a pin in. And now what we're going to do is sew along on either side at 1/4 inch along that line. Now I'm going to sew down both sides of the line with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I'm not using my normal 1/4 inch foot because it's got that ridge on it and it will get caught. So I'm using a standard foot, and what I did was I just did a quick check. I just drew a line on a piece of fabric and I worked out my best guide and checked it first so that I know I am stitching at 1/4 inch. And I've got my Oracle thread on, which is what I like to use for quilting, and I'm stitching at stitch length 2. So I'm going to start at the very edge of my piece here, and I'm not going to worry about a back stitch, and I'm going to stitch all the way down to the end. Come right off the edge, trim my thread while I'm here, and then I'm just going to turn around and do exactly the same on the other side. And then I'll take my second piece and I'll do exactly the same for this piece. Okay, now I'm just going to give that a quick press. So now we're just going to cut along the line we drew. So I'm just going to take my ruler, line it up on that line, and I can also see that my stitches are lined up on that 1/4 inch there. And I'm just going to take my rotary cutter and cut straight across. Now I've got 2 pieces, and I'll do that for the second one that we did as well. And now we need to press. So I've got 4 half square triangles now. I'm just going to set the stitches so they set in like the name suggests, and it also helps the block lay flatter. Then I'm going to open it up, and we want to press the seams towards the dark. I'm going to open that up, give it a finger press because we don't want any creases in here. We want it to be sitting really nice and flat, and then I'm going to press. And I'll do that for all 4 pieces. So now we have our 4 half square triangles, and we want to take one of each of the designs. So I've got one here, and I've got my A fabric and my B fabric, and then the second one has my A fabric and my C fabric. So we're going to face them down together, but we don't want the 2 A fabrics facing each other. So if I just open that up, can you see how the A fabric or the purple fabric, one is on this side and one is on this side? That's exactly what we want. So I'm just going to close that back up. We're going to line up the edges, but most importantly the center here, we also want that lined up nicely. And it's almost like nesting seams. You can feel that the seams coming down and around that way at the top, and then down and around that way at the bottom. So we can actually nest them. And once you feel that they're sitting nicely, then we can pin them in place. So what I like to do is I just open it up and check that those seams are sitting nicely. So if you take a look, all 4 points are all joining up really nicely. Now what we're going to do is actually draw a line down here and cut. So I'm going to pop a pin on this side, and then another one on this side, but once again I will just open it up and check it, and it was a little bit off there, but now it's correct. Make sure it's nice and flat. Just going to check that again, and you can see that's sitting really nicely. And then once I'm happy, I'm just going to take my ruler and draw a line again from this corner to this corner. And I'm just using a chalk pencil, but you can use anything you want because we're not going to see it. Oops. Okay, so that's our first set done. Take my second set. Once again, checking that I've got the A fabrics on either side. Just making sure that those seams are sort of nested nicely. The edges look pretty lined up, but the most important thing is that the seams are nested so that we're getting really nice perfect points here. So just checking on that side before I pin. Just checking it again, and then on this side. Oh, it's a little bit off. Okay, once I'm happy, I'm just going to pop a pin in, and once again I'm going to draw my line down the center there. So now what we're going to do is exactly the same as the first time, is we're going to sew down either side with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So all I'm going to do is exactly the same as last time, working out my best guide for a 1/4 inch seam allowance, starting at the edge, not worrying about a back stitch, and sewing all the way down to the end, and then turning it around and doing the same on the other side. And I'll do this for both pieces. Now when we come up to these seams, just make sure they are facing the right way. This seam is facing away from me, and that's how I want it to be sewn down. So if your foot is pushing it down, you can just stop, lift up your foot, make sure your needle is down, and just adjust it, because we want them to be sitting really nicely. Alright, now I'm just going to give that a quick press so it's sitting nicely before I cut it. So now all we're going to do is cut along that line that we drew again. So I'll just take my ruler, line it up on the line from the corner to the corner. Again, I can see my stitches sitting under the 1/4 inch mark. and then cutting with my rotary cutter. Oh. Doing the same for the second set we did. And now we're going to press them open. So now we've got 4 sets, and I'm just going to do exactly the same. I'm going to set the stitches. Then I'm going to open it up, and it doesn't matter which way we set the seams. I'm going to give it a finger press so I've got no little creases in here. And once I'm happy, I'll press. And there we have it, our first quarter square triangle. And then I'll repeat that for all 4 pieces. So now we have our 4 pieces. We just have to square them up so they're all 4.5 inches squared. So I've got my Creative Grids ruler here, which is exactly 4.5 inches, and it's got a little circle which indicates the very center of the 4.5 inches squared, which is super handy because then I just place that right on top of the meeting point where you see all the 4 corners meeting up here, as well as lining up that line with the seam. So I know that that's exactly in the middle, which makes this ruler very handy for this block. And then what I'm going to do is just cut off the excess on all 4 sides. Now I know some people can cut that way, I cannot, so I'm just going to keep some pressure on, turn it around. Oh, I moved it, so now I'm just going to double check I'm all still lined up nicely. A rotating mat would be really nice right about now, but that's okay, we managed to do that. Now if you don't have one of these rulers, you can use a regular one, you just have to do a little bit more work. So what we're going to do is pop our piece down, find that seam line there, and then line it up with the 45 degrees on the ruler. Sorry, it's a bit of a squeeze with the camera. So what I'm going to do is line up the 45 degree line on my ruler with the seam on my piece here. And then what we need to do is check that we are 4.5 inches. So that's not quite right there. So we want to make sure that our whole block is sitting within the 4.5 inches. So I can see I'll cut off all these ratty bits and then I'll have a nice sharp edge, and then I'll count 1, 2, 3, 4.5. So I can see if I cut this side here now and this side at 4.5, it would be perfect. But there is one more thing we need to check. We need to check that we're sitting right at 2.25 inch on the center to make sure that the center is staying exactly in the middle. And I'm actually a little bit off here, so I'm just going to move it a little bit down, because don't forget we're lining this line up on the seam. And now that looks perfect. So if I come across and count 1, 2.25, my 2.25 is exactly on the corner here where all 4 corners meet up. So once I'm happy, I'll just cut. Then I'm going to turn that around and do the same on the other side. Lining up the seam on the line on the ruler, counting 1, 2.25, and that looks perfect. And then if I check here, I can see this edge of the block is sitting, well, piece rather, is sitting exactly at 4.5, so that's perfect. So cut that excess off. And then we'll do exactly the same on the other side. Lining up that seam, so it's 2.25 inches exactly on the point where all 4 corners meet, and then trimming, turning it around and doing it on the other side as well. Okay, so I can see that's sitting at exactly 2.25 inches, and again it's sitting perfectly here at 4.5 inches. So it is a little bit more tricky, But like I said, this one ruler you can do everything with. So now, whichever ruler you've got, please cut the remaining 2 pieces at exactly 4.5 inches squared. So now we're ready to sew all our pieces together to create our Ohio Star block. So I'm just going to take a look at my image and make sure that it is looking like this when I lay them out. So I'll take my 4 pieces. Oh, they're a bit mixed up. These are my D pieces in there for each of the corners. So 1 in each of the corners, and then this is my E fabric, and that's going in the center. And now our quarter square triangles. So for me, my B fabric was the green fabric, so I'm just going to make sure that the B fabric is facing in towards E, or the center. And there we have our Ohio Star. So now what we're going to do is just sew the rows together, and then we'll sew them together. So what I like to do, you might want to do chain piecing, but I get in a bit of a pickle, so I'm just going to take this piece, fold it over on top so right sides are together, roughly pin it, open it back up, and do the same on this side so I know exactly the order I want to sew them in. I'll do that for the second row and the third row. Now let's sew them together. So now I've just got one of my rows. We can sew them in any order we would like to at this stage. I'm just going to take that pin out and line up all the edges so they're lining up on the side, the top, and the side again. I'm actually going to flip that over and work on this side, because as I'm sewing I want to make sure these seams are sitting how I've pressed them so that my block will be sitting really nicely. And once I'm happy that's all lined up nicely, I'm just going to pop my pin back in, and I'm going to stitch with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I do have my 1/4 inch foot on because when I can, I do prefer to use it. I'm not going to worry about a back stitch, and I'm still stitching at stitch length 2. And you can see my foot's trying to grab that seam and push it down. So I'm just going to make sure my needle's down, lift my foot up, fix it up so it's sitting nicely, and then carry on. Just going to trim those threads as we go. Find the next pin, take it out, flip it over to the side with all the seams again. Line up the edges on both sides and the top. And I'll just repeat this process until I've sewn all the rows together. So now we're just going to press our seams, and I've just made sure it's sitting in the correct order, and that's easy to see because I've created this little square here with my green fabric. So just check that they're all sitting in the correct order, and we want to be able to nest our seams. So we need to press one row, let's say this row here, down, this row up, and this row down again. So I'll just start on this row here, and I'm just going to set the seams. And then I'm just going to make sure those seams are sitting down, and again making sure there's no little creases in there. We want it sitting really nice and flat. And then again for this piece. So if those are coming down, these ones need to be going up. So I'll just set those stitches. And then we want the seams facing upwards. So making sure it's sitting nicely. Just give the whole piece a press, because why not? And then if they're going up, well, these ones need to be coming down. So just making sure they're facing down, finger pressing. And we can give the whole piece a nice press. And now let's sew our rows together. So So now I've just made sure my pieces are in the correct order again, and you can see I've got the green or the sage that's creating that square in the center. And then I'm just going to sew these rows together. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take one row. I'll take this outer piece here, fold it on top of the center one, so the right sides are together, and I want to sew along this edge. So I'm just going to pick it up, and I'm just going to nest the seams. So remember, when we're nesting, we just open it up and make sure those seams are nested together. So these seams are folded and coming this way, underneath are folded and coming that way, and then when we push them together they can't go anywhere else, but they're just nicely nested. And then I'm going to pop a pin in. You might want to pop 1 or 2, just whatever you like to do to keep that in place. Then I'll find the second lot of seams, do exactly the same. I do like to open it up and check it's all nicely lined up. Pop a pin in, and then I just like to come to the end and make sure that's all nicely lined up and pop a pin in, and then we'll come to the beginning. So when we come to the beginning, we make sure these edges are lined up and the top edges, and I will just pop a pin in, and now I'm just going to sew along that edge. So I'm just using my 1/4 inch foot again, doing exactly what we did last time, not worrying about a back stitch. Just starting at the very edge and sewing to the very end. Just like to trim my threads as I go. Now I'm just going to open it up, take that last piece, make sure I'm attaching it to the right side, so again creating that square, folding it over so the right sides are together, finding those seams, nesting them, and just doing exactly the same thing. And just sewing again like we did the last seam. And now let's give it a final press and have a look at our block. So I'll just set the stitches on the 2 rows we just sewed. And then we'll open it up. Finger press it doesn't matter which way you press the seams at this stage. Giving that a finger press. And there we have it. I'm going to give it a once over, because you know I love to press my blocks. And there we have our Ohio star. What do you think? Isn't that cool? Okay, there you go, the Ohio star block. Now it is a little bit more complicated than the blocks we've done in the past. My advice is just to take your time and not rush. Take your time with the cutting, the sewing and the pressing, and you'll end up with great results. Don't forget you can find the cutting instructions and a little bit more about the Ohio star block over on my website, and I'll put a link in the description below. Please make sure you've subscribed and hit the bell button so you don't miss out on an upcoming tutorial. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you next week. Thank you for watching my videos. If you're enjoying them, please like, subscribe and leave a comment.